Folks, I'm gonna give y'all a little insight into a typical conversation with me and Greg. So every day we talk, we have our, what's going on with the family text conversations, and we'll go back and forth a little bit. We have our, hey, check out this article, let me know what you think. Those kind of conversations, and we almost always have those conversations about what product should I buy, what software, what just talking through product purchases and giving each other recommendations and stuff like that. That's usually 90% of our conversations. Last week, in the middle of conversations about which phones we were going to pre-order, if you guys listened to the show last week, it was our hot takes after the Apple event, and we were just discussing, going through what we're going to pre-order, what can we order, what are we things we have to go into the store for. And Greg hits me with oh yeah, I just booked a trip to Disney and we're leaving tomorrow. So
Yeah.
not our usual conversation. So we spent maybe the next couple of hours like, where did this come along? How did this happen? Greg is not the most spontaneous person that I know, and it's funny because I did mention, like, where did spontaneous Greg come from? I'm used to by the books, plan every detail, plan for every single alternative or outcome or things like that. I'm used to that, Greg. But nice to meet you. I'm glad you're here, and that was a pretty fun conversation. So today, what I'm thinking is, we go through that whole conversation that we had. How did this trip come along? Uh, what was the thinking behind everything, and also how did the trip go? Right, because you're already back. You're freshly back from
Yep.
Disney, right, Greg?
I'm back
So
in reality, wishing I was back in Fantasyland.
yeah, yeah, and we're going to talk about that today, and just go into the details of that, and talk about some of these pictures and some of the experiences that he had. It was really really fun. If you've been planning a trip to Disney, thinking about going to Disney, well, you're in the right place. This is Gadgets for Families, the tech show where you get two tech grandpas talking about technology and giving recommendations and things like that. And this week we're both in vacation mode.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, folks, thanks for joining us again. This is Gadgets for Families. I'm your host, Jay Benjamin.
And I'm your host, Greg Cunningham, back in reality, unfortunately.
Womp womp. It's always rough when you come back from vacation to try to get your mind back into work mode, and
Yeah.
so I know how you feel.
I'm back in reality, and Jay's getting ready to leave reality. So I guess
Right.
that's the way
So
it goes.
we're going for 2 weeks, and the day we come back, the next day is a huge event. I mean, so not only do I have to relax hard, but when we come back, I have to hit it pretty hard to prepare for a pretty big event, along with all of our regular, our regular scheduled programs. So yeah, so I'm going to be working the day we get off of the ship, which is not usually the case. I usually get to take that day to relax and the next day, but so it's kind of the same with you. You're already back to meetings and
Yeah.
stuff, right? Today.
Back and right at it. I had a busy day yesterday with getting some stuff caught up, and so that's the thing, folks. I mean, we are in vacation mode. We're going to talk about this, as Jay mentioned in the intro. I'll talk about my trip, and then Jay will talk about his eventually too. But we are going to cover some tech, because there are some things about Disney that are 100% tech related. I don't want to spoil that, so we'll get to that there. But yeah, I mean, two grandpas talking about tech if we feel like it. If we don't feel
Right.
like it, we talk about whatever else we feel like it, because us grandpas, we have all the opinions.
Yep,
So
yep. All
there
the
you go.
advice, and we're usually almost always right. So definitely listen to us. Uh, Also stick around for the our post show, our extra innings, to hear about what's changed since the Apple Glow Glow Time event that they had last week. What did we order? Some One of us pre-ordered a lot, and some of us
Mm.
another one didn't pre-order anything that we thought we were going to pre-order. So, what's changed since the announcement? Also, some details and information that's came out. Before we get to all of that, thanks for everyone that's been listening. Um, Again, we know your grandpas like to give a lot of advice and things like that. So thanks for anyone that's just tuning in. If you're liking the content, then consider hitting that subscribe button and giving us a like. It helps the show out a lot. So we really appreciate it. Um, so catch up for this week. This whole show is going to be basically a catch up, right? So we're going to skip that and let's talk about some current stuff. Greg, you got some
Yep.
announcements on the OSs?
Yeah. Real quick, all the new OSs are out, including Mac OS. So they dropped everything: iPhone, iPad, Mac, Watch, Vision Pro yesterday. They all dropped. So you may now proceed to install. I know we've been telling you
Yeah.
not to install the betas. Don't install the betas. Don't install the betas. So you may now proceed to install. And I would recommend it. I mean, I'm not hearing any issues with major functions or any of that kind of stuff. So if you're ready for it, go ahead. So
Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
it installed on both of my iPads. I have not put it on my phone yet, and I'll explain why in the post show. So, and I definitely did not put it on my Mac yet, just because I've got a big day today, and I got to put it on the Mac when I can fiddle with it, because the Mac is a little more
Right.
fiddly. So,
Right. Right. I saw Brandon Butch's video show up in my feed. And I'm like, oh, it's out already. And the phone was about in bed, so I went ahead and installed it. And already had some issues this morning, so I'm like, I should have waited till after we recorded. But it's fine. Go ahead and install it. You'll see a lot of apps still not updated yet. Throughout the whole week, you'll just see the App Store, your little red bubble on your app. You'll see updates released all week for it. So,
yep.
but yeah, you can go ahead and install it. Still
The
hadn't
other
done the
thing I,
watch, which is the main thing I wanted.
yeah, that's my hard part about not doing the phone, is I really want the watch, and I'm having some issues with my watch that I'm hoping it'll solve, but I'll explain that in the post show.
Yeah. Yeah. All
The other
right.
thing I wanted to mention is that if you are, Apple last week said they were seeking FDA approval for both the sleep apnea testing on the watch and the
Mm-hmm.
hearing aid features on the AirPods Pro 2. And so they said those things will be out later this fall. So sometimes that could mean, like, what's the last day of fall? That would be when they would release, right?
Right.
But the funny thing is, both of those FDA approvals for the US came through already. So, we
Cool.
don't know if they had a deal with the FDA that said, hey, please don't announce that you've approved these till we get done with the event, or that's just how the timing worked out. But both of
Mm-hmm.
those things now have FDA approval. So
Yeah.
that's great. So they're not out yet. So you just have to, we'll wait and see when they drop the next AirPods software update, as well as the next watch version. We'll start watching for that. But yeah, if you were thinking, maybe FDA won't approve those and it'll be an issue. Nope, approved. So
Yeah. Yep. Went right through. They jumped on that process early, I'm sure. And like you said, they probably had some kind of arrangement to say, hey, let us announce it first. And then, because the government doesn't approve anything within a week's time. So,
yeah,
so,
unless it's the fact that you owe them taxes, that they can
oh
approve
yeah,
really fast.
that moves lightning fast. Yeah. Everything else takes forever. So our tiny tip for this week comes from my 8-year-old daughter. So this is a really cool tip she found, and this is just kind of a temporary workaround. This is not a long-term solution, although she's going to try to push it as long as she can. She found a really cool trick that if you're missing the tip from your Apple Pencil, and hers is one of those generic, those $15 Amazon ones that I recommend because they work just as fine for an 8-year-old. Do not buy them $100 Apple Pencil for the tip to get gnawed down or broken off or lost or something like that. So she found a tip. She found a little trick to where you can clip off the end of a Q-tip. And so you'll pull out that gnawed down or that broken tip, stylus tip, and then stick the Q-tip down into the pencil and wet the tip a little bit. And it transfers that capacitive, touch to the tip of the cotton of the Q-tip, and you can actually touch. She actually showed me on her iPad, and it worked. It worked really good. Now, it's not as accurate as, of course, the tip of a pencil. Uh, and I believe once the tip starts drying up, it won't work. But if you're in a bind and you need your Apple Pencil until your Prime order delivers in 2 to 3 days, or however long it's taking, um, even if you didn't order it from Amazon, this will get you through a couple of days, a couple of uses till you can get some replacement tips in. So really cool tip. She wanted me to share that with you guys, and I thought it was pretty. She found it on her own. She showed me and her mom. So uh, um, really good tip. I think that I thought it was going to be a fun thing to share. So if you're using an Apple Pencil, if you have one laying around with a missing tip, and you're like, hey, I can uh, I can use that until I can order some tips, then yeah, that's a good tip. So
Yeah, I didn't mention, but Dustin's Apple Pencil, so he uses it pretty extensively, right? I mean, he's writing music, annotating sheet music on his iPad and stuff like that, but his Apple Pencil just died. And so
really,
he got one of the cheaper ones. It just wouldn't connect. He could see it charging, but it's something to do with the Bluetooth. So,
okay.
but he got one of the ones off of Amazon instead of getting the expensive one. He's like, no, I really want to try a cheaper one. I even, after the fact, thought, well, I have the original Apple Pencil here for my iPad Mini because it won't do the new Pro
hmm
one. So, but yeah, so he's using a Amazon one too. So
How's he liking it compared to, for what his use case is? Is he seeing a difference in performance and all of that? I mean, he's writing music, and
nope,
they all seem to
because
write fine.
yeah, no, he's not had any issues with it. I mean, I like it because I like
Good.
this. The squeeze gesture is phenomenal. Being able to switch between the eraser
Right,
and
right,
the pencil or whatever with just a squeeze instead of the double tap that was kind of inconsistent and stuff. But yeah, for what he's using it for, he really doesn't need the more extensive one. So
right.
I mean,
Well, good
that's
deal.
not to get us off on a tangent, but they're more and more, some of the Apple stuff that they label pro really is pro, not prosumer,
Right.
but really is kind of pro. And that's a good example. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, I'm not a professional artist, but those features really are designed for a professional artist that needs
Yeah.
all of the tools right at their disposal.
I would think so too. And these things, they're not for precision drawing, and you're working on schematics and things like that. So you're right. There are certain things, certain use cases that you need the Pro Pencil. You need these professional Apple pencils, right? Not just the Pencil Pro, but the second generation one, the one that I hate. Um, the one where you have to pop the top off and plug it in, and
Yeah.
um, I I just hate that product. I don't know why Apple did that to people. And then it's still, what, 80, $90. Um, but even if you need, if you just need to write, if you just giving it to your grandchild, just to color or watercolor, or whatever apps they're using requires a pencil, then man, I just can't recommend enough. Just go and get one of these $15, $20, pencils from Amazon, and it will work just as good.
Yep. Agreed.
So that was a tip for today. So let's talk about this Disney trip, Greg. And again, like I mentioned, Greg is not. I'm not going to say a control freak, although he may describe himself as that. Uh, let me say this: Greg is not go with the flow at all. Greg
Nope.
is not a go with the flow type of person, right? So, let's say his wife was like really spontaneous, and she was like, "Hey, I feel like going to Disney. I booked a trip to Disney." I don't see that sitting well with Greg. Greg has to have every single detail and stuff planned out, which is not a bad thing at all. At all. It's actually one of the features that I love about Greg. From the day I met him, he was just, you know, always, well, what about this? Well, what about that? Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And always challenging you to make sure that all of your bases are covered. So I'm not saying that that's a fault or character flaw or anything like that. Um, so I wanted to ask Greg, how did this whole thing come about, right? Because we were having a conversation about iPhone pre-orders and who needs what device for for the task and stuff that they get done. And and like I say, you just hit me with that Disney trip. How did this whole thing come about?
So our anniversary was in August, but we hadn't even been moved down here a year. Our daughter's schedule was not set yet, right? So she was working some weird shifts because she was still in training and she wasn't on the
Right.
7 on, 7 off that she's now on. And so, we didn't really do anything. I think we went to dinner or something. But we've been wanting to do something. So we never did anything real big for our 20th. We didn't do anything really big for our 25th. So, and our next big one's the 30 in a couple years. So I'm old. Remember, I'm old. So, we wanted to do something. And so when we looked at the calendar, I thought, you know what, we'll just go while Jay's on his cruise, right? So
Right.
that we don't have to worry about the show, overlap, that kind of stuff, and it'll all be good. And then I looked at the weekends for the rest of this, or looked at my daughter's schedule for the rest of this month, and she picked up some extra shifts. So literally last weekend was the only weekend that we won't have the grandkids.
Mm-hmm.
So I looked at that, and then honestly, I just realized I was burned mentally with the move and getting everything set up down here. And then I've started ramping up some client work. So I'm putting in more time, and the type of work I'm doing for my client right now is mentally draining. It's fine, right? But it just takes the mental stuff out. And so
Yeah.
I realized last Monday that I was approaching that point where the work I was doing wasn't going to be up to my standards, which Jason,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I set really high standards for myself. So I thought, okay, let's go do something this weekend. And cause we wouldn't have the kids and it would be our last opportunity. And so Tuesday we started talking about, going back up to where we camp, not pulling the trailer, but either getting a hotel room up there or maybe a cabin at the park or whatever, and just spending 4 or 5 days up there hiking. I could ride, my wife could walk around. It's a little kind of resorty kind of town, so she could do
Yeah.
some shopping or whatever else she wanted to do. And um that was the discussion Tuesday, and she left the trailer about 11:30, and right before noon I just had this thought, well, maybe we could do a Disney trip. And my sister, who I know will listen to this episode because I told her what we were going to talk about, is a
Mm-hmm.
Disney nut, right? I mean, she would have season passes if they could. But
Okay.
so I texted her and I said, hey, we've only really got 3 days that we could go. Is it worth doing a trip just for something like that? And she was like, you're asking the wrong person. Absolutely.
She
And
said, of course, if you're just going for 15 minutes, then go.
yeah. And then when I mentioned it to my wife, it was over. So by noon, I was researching the passes because you have to have reservations at the parks now, right? And
Right.
actually, interesting enough, I heard that the one night we had already left the parks, but the one night they hit capacity and weren't letting anybody back in. So
Wow.
which is a very unusual for Disney to get that full. But um, anyway, so I was researching passes, then I was researching hotels and checking out 5 or 6 hotels and all this
Mm-hmm.
kind of stuff. And it still took me 2 hours to actually pull the trigger and put the credit card number in anything. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of how it came about. So it was definitely pretty spontaneous, and I spent the rest of the day freaking out about, did I do everything I needed to do, or is this going to work out? What else do we need to do? So Yeah.
Yeah. So, and again, you're very detail oriented. That's the thing that I love about you. So you decided to go ahead and hit book, put the credit cards in. You got everything booked. Tell us about the planning after that, because I know once you committed to go ahead and do it, you everything was booked. The credit cards were already hit, or there was a hold on the credit cards or whatever. No turning back. Tell us about that planning process, right? Did you even sleep between the time
Well,
that you booked and the time that you left, or were you spending every waking moment planning for every detail? How did that
I
go?
had to let some of it go against my better
Right?
judgment. I actually had to work still that afternoon, right? So because I took 2 hours to book the trip, and that was only tickets and hotel, right? I mean, nothing else. There's nothing
Mm-hmm.
else to book, right? I booked tickets and hotel and looked at airfare for 2 seconds and then decided that that wasn't going to work. But
Right.
I think we went to bed by about midnight. And then I still had a meeting the next morning. I still hadn't told my client that I was doing this, right? So they had no clue that I
Right.
was just going to be gone the rest of the week. Um, so then we were pulling up all the different things about packing lists for Disney, right? What do you need to take? What
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't you take? And so that resulted in a trip to Best Buy because we didn't have any. I've got one giant battery pack, but it's super, super old. And it used to recharge your iPhone 5 or 6 times. It was great for scout
Right.
camps, but now the batteries are so much bigger, right? It
Yeah.
just wouldn't
It
have
doesn't
cut
work
it.
on
So that,
nothing works on the pros. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So went and got a couple of battery packs because I didn't know just how much we would drain the batteries, and ended up with two. Only really needed one, um, but that's fine because now we have them, right? I mean, they're just here in the trailer, and then it also resulted in a couple of trips to Walmart to, we wanted a little bit smaller water bottles versus the giant ones that we use here, um,
Right.
and then snacks and stuff for the road trip. So yeah, there was a lot of that, but like planning what we were going to do when we got there, planning what we wanted to see in the park, any of that kind of stuff. We just didn't do it
Mm-hmm.
that night, but there was enough of the other stuff. We had to get suitcases from my daughters because that's where they were. And then I had to figure out, am I putting my bike in storage and the bike rack in storage, or, what am I doing with the trailer while we're gone, and all that kind of stuff, which, sidebar, I told you this while we were gone, having HomeKit and being able to check my cameras and the
Yep.
temperature in the trailer to make sure that the AC was doing what it was supposed to do. Because again, we're down in a hot environment and not something we've done before. So it was super, super comforting to just be able to check that stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yep. It does. I think I mentioned before, I feel naked when I can't communicate with the house. I feel like I'm missing something. I feel like, you know what I mean? When I
yeah,
can't see what's going on here at the house, whether it's the sensors or look at the cameras, or if the HomeKit hub is not responding and letting me know what's going on, I feel vulnerable. So, it's probably not a good thing,
yeah.
especially when you're on vacation. But yeah.
Well, and I did have that
So
hiccup, right? I told you that all of a sudden none of my hubs were responding. So I'm hoping it was just an update
yeah, just
because
an
they came
update.
back on a little bit later and then we're fine. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
think it was just an update. So okay, so everything is planned. You guys, the hotel's booked. As many details as you wanted, because, like we say, it's still a vacation, right? Uh, um, there's still some aspects that you just got to go with the flow. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Even though I know you don't
yep.
like that, you can't plan for everything. Um,
Or plan
how
it
was the
when you
trip
get
there?
there.
Yeah, plan it when you get there. Let's check the crowd. Let's see if the crowd is how's the environment and stuff. And then if we decide to go do that or go check out this restaurant, that's what I mean. Stuff
Right.
like that.
Yeah. Yep.
Um, so the trip over, I thought you guys were going to fly, but I know that last minute flights are pretty outrageous. So, you decided to drive. How was that trip over?
It was great. I mean, one of the reasons we drove is because by the time we drove to Vegas to get on an airplane, you're a third of the way there. right? So
Right.
if you just do the math on the time, driving to Vegas, getting on into the airport 2 hours early or an hour early, even the 45-minute flight or whatever it is, then getting through LAX, because that's where you would fly if you wanted to fly cheap, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then getting in a Uber or whatever to get to the hotel. I mean, just by the time you do all of that, the time is probably sixes, right?
Yeah.
So, and they have flights out of here, but they didn't have any for that day at all. So, and they would have been
Okay.
way more expensive. Um, so we drove, and will say that adaptive cruise that I mentioned in the episode when we talked about the Explorer, that was
Mm-hmm.
phenomenal on these rides. You just set it to where you wanted to be. The only thing I had to adapt to is I had to realize that if I was in the middle lane and started coming up on a car, it was gradually would slow me down. And before you knew it, I was 10 miles an hour lower than I had cruise set, and it'll just sit there, right? It doesn't tell you
Okay.
it's doing it or any of those kinds of things. So I had to remember to get over a lane if I knew somebody was going, if I was approaching someone, I had to remember to get
Yeah.
over sooner. But it was that adaptive cruise was phenomenal. CarPlay, being able to do CarPlay the whole way was just incredible. We actually don't use the CarPlay a ton when we're just going around here because it's like 10-minute drive here, 10-minute drive there. You know,
Right.
nothing
Right.
major. So, but yeah, that was the drive, and then coming back was much of the same. Although coming back was just exhausting because you're tired. So,
So once you got there, and I'm assuming because you had a lot of night pictures and the park looked empty, you showed me the one where they have the big fall pumpkin display above the gates. So I'm assuming you got there at night. Once you got there, what was your first impressions when you got there? Because I don't know if we mentioned this is your first Disney trip too, right? Or had you been
uh,
when you were younger?
since the week I graduated high school. So I had been once when I was
Okay.
16. We went on what they called grad night, which is basically they let seniors come out and you're in the park overnight. So you go
Okay.
in at like 11 o'clock at night and you get out at like 5 o'clock in the morning, kind of thing. So I had done those two trips, but that was over 20 years ago, over 30
Yeah.
years ago, actually. So it's been a very, very long time. It's a very different park. So yeah, I mean, we got there, checked in, grabbed the hotel shuttle over to and hit downtown Disney that first night. And I'll say
Okay.
that's when I finally got excited to be there. Up until then,
Okay.
I was just anxious, you know, anxious getting there. On the drive out, there's a huge fire going on, and I was worried that the in Orange County there was a massive fire, and I was worried
Mm-hmm.
that the smoke was going to be down in the Anaheim area and stuff like that. And as we drove through certain parts, I mean, you could not see some of the mountains as you drove through some of those passes
Wow. That much smoke.
because it was pretty bad. And a lot of it had blown in here the night before. So there was a lot of anxiety. First big trip in the car. Is it going to
Mm-hmm.
hold up, right? Where am I stopping along the way? And um, all that kind of stuff. But once we got off the shuttle and walked through security to go into downtown Disney, I don't know, something clicked, and I just
Right.
relaxed and realized, okay, now I'm super excited to be there. And part of that was I didn't even know that this was going to be the case, but it totally makes sense. Everything was Halloween decorated, right? They have all of their
Right.
Halloween special stuff going on, so everything's orange. And then California Land was the what's his name, the big ghost guy, um, that
Boogie. Boogie Oogie.
Boogie, Oogie Boogie, or
Yeah.
whatever his name is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So all of this stuff, and I went, oh yeah, it's gonna all be Halloween decorated. And I'm not a big Halloween person. I don't do a whole lot for Halloween. So, but yeah, it was all Halloween decorated, even downtown Disney. And I took some of those pictures. Talk about the time that you want the iPhone with its low light performance from a
Right.
camera
Right.
standpoint, right? Is um, on not only on those decorations, but also when you're inside rides, because a lot of them are dark. And so that the low light 3-second exposure kind of stuff was just going on all the
Yeah.
time on my
So
pictures.
we're
So
we're gonna talk about that when we talk about tech, but man, the colors was just amazing in low light. Now, three
yeah,
iPhones ago, we wouldn't have had pictures nowhere near as good. But like,
Yeah.
I'm looking at the pictures and it's just doing something to my eyes where it feels like it's glowing in the picture. Like I'm seeing the
Oh yeah.
light glow in the picture. It's crazy,
The
crazy.
the downside is that it reinforced that I need to buy the new phone every year, no matter what improvements they make to the camera, as long as there are some, right? Because
Right,
you just
right.
and the thing about it is, I did have some weird things where the flash tried to pop on a couple of times, and you're not supposed to have flash
Hmm.
photography anywhere in those rides, right? But other than that, just to be able to put it up there and hit the button and try and hold it for 2 or 3 seconds, but even if I didn't make it the full time, to still have the pictures turn out to where you could have a decent picture, right? So
Yeah.
anyway, that's when I relaxed. We went to downtown Disney, and my sister this whole time is telling me all the stuff I need to do, right? And the worst part
Yeah.
was she was telling me all the things I needed to eat. Um, so which sidebar,
That's the good part.
it is sidebar is so the first day in the parks we did 13 miles, I want to say. We walked 13 miles. It was 25,000 steps that we did
Wow.
on day
Okay.
1 in the park. That was a mistake pushing it that hard, but I'll talk about it in a second. But um
Hmm.
so we did 3 days in the parks and I still managed to gain weight. So yeah. So
Right.
yeah, we went there. We wandered around, kind of wandered through the shops and stuff, listened to a little bit to one of the shows that they had going on, but just tried to walk through and get a feel, walk through the big giant World of Disney souvenir shop that they have, and weren't really looking to buy anything. The biggest question I had for Karen is, do you want us to have matching shirts? And
Right.
so I think actually we did. So we bought one set of shirts that first night so that we could wear them the next day, or anyway, some combination of that stuff.
Right.
It's all blurry in my mind, which is why you take pictures. So, but yeah, it was
Yeah.
great, all Halloween decorated, but it wasn't the kind of Halloween that I don't like. Um, so it was just good fun stuff. So yeah, it was awesome.
So what kind of Halloween don't you like? Like the ghouls, the ghosts and ghouls and the gory stuff? Or
I don't like the horror
because
part of Halloween. I don't like
okay.
the stuff that gets into that crosses the line in my mind, spiritual stuff. Right. So, and I had a couple of experiences when I was a teenager with Halloween that just turned off from that kind of stuff. So
Okay.
I did buy
All
a
right.
Halloween themed shirt because it's Halloween and everything was there. It'll be my Halloween costume for the rest of my life. So I'll just put on that T-shirt and
Right.
call it good.
All right.
So
You're celebrating. That's you're part of the celebration.
yep,
So that's good.
yep.
All right. So let's talk about the park itself. So your sister scouted out all of the food places for you. And but let's talk about the crowds, the rides, anything you want to talk about.
So crowds weren't too bad.
Okay.
Unless you go to Fantasyland, because then it's just all of these families with little kids, right? That's where all of the little kid rides, the teacups, and all of that kind
Which
of
is
stuff.
where
And
the next trip you're going to spend most of your time. It's
yeah,
in
yeah, yep, yep,
Fantasyland. Yep.
yep, yep. So, other than having to walk through it a couple of times, there was a place we ate at once that was there, and then it was kind of the bridge between Star Wars Land and Tomorrowland. Um, so
Right.
had to walk through it a couple of times. That was not fun because it's just a bottleneck and so many people. So, but
Yeah.
so the crowds weren't too bad. And like I said, the second night we actually did California Adventures day 2, but we ran out of steam, so we were home. I don't know, by 5 o'clock. We were back at the hotel and actually ate dinner at the hotel, and then crashed because we just didn't have any energy. I'm
Right.
old, so the crowds weren't bad. Um, Food was great. Pim's Test Kitchen in
Okay.
California Land, which is part of Marvel or part of Avenger Campus. Um, the pretzel that was bigger than my head,
Right.
phenomenal,
It looked
and
really good.
it was fantastic. And the pasta that I had that had a giant meatball and an itty bitty meatball and a giant pasta and itty bitty pasta, right? Because it's all about the Ant-Man and the Wasp, right? The shrinking and that kind of stuff. So
Right. Right.
that was good. We had, I think, Karen had like 5 churros, just fresh churros right off the thing, and so she had a
Yeah.
bunch of those.
So
Giant
what was
sugar
the
cookies. Yeah.
there was it looked like a hot dog, but when you look at it, there was no sausage or wiener. There was um it looked like a falafel meat, maybe. We were trying to figure out what it was. It looked like a hot dog with all of the fixings, but there was no sausage in it. What was that?
Was Karen eating it?
I believe it was Karen's. I believe it was Karen's pictures that she posted.
Was it there by the? So was it when we had the pretzel? That was a giant.
Right.
That was a giant salad in a giant taco salad. So it's like a giant taco shell,
Okay.
and it had all of the salad stuff inside of it.
Okay. You know what? I think my wife did say she thought it was a taco, like a taco bowl, but
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
just like a salad. Okay, that makes
Yep.
sense. That makes sense.
Yeah, that it was at Pim's Kitchen too. So, uh, you saw the one spider web Mickey ear cookie that was the size of my head. I actually got a second one of those for the trip home. That was great.
Right.
What else is super good? Giant sourdough Mickey vampire. So it was a Mickey shaped sourdough bread that was, the size of my chest. And the only problem is unless you get reservations way well in advance, most of the sit down stuff is going to be booked. And so that's why we actually went back to the hotel and ate at the hotel. They had a
Hmm.
Mexican food buffet at the hotel, and did that because we needed something that wasn't deep fried.
Right.
Because you just almost everything else is, but the breakfast stuff was good. I had fish and chips over in Tomorrowland at one point, so food was awesome. Food was great.
Okay.
Crowds weren't horrible. So
Okay. Well, you told
rides,
me about some wait times. You told me
yeah,
like you were gonna go to you wanted to go back to a certain ride, but the wait time had already jumped up to like 2 hours or something like that.
yeah.
So is that normal?
Let's hold off on the wait times until we talk about the tech, because I
Okay.
want to talk about using the Disney app. So,
Okay.
um,
Okay.
but rides in general. So one of the things that's phenomenal. So Haunted Mansion was decked out in Nightmare Before Christmas, right? Jack. What was
Yes.
funny is I'm a huge Pirates of the Caribbean fan. I'm wearing the pirate shirt that I got even. And so that's the ride we did the most. I think we did it 5 times. Um, but you walk out after you come off of a ride, you always go through the gift shop that's themed around the ride, right? And
Right.
so we're standing in the Pirates of the Caribbean place, and everybody's going, "There's Jack!" And I'm turning around looking for Jack Sparrow, and it was
Hmm.
Jack from Nightmare.
Jack Skellington.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, because they had a photo place for him right next to it. So, but Haunted Mansion was all decked out like that. We only got to do it once because you had to get in a virtual queue and wait your turn because it was themed the way it was.
Hmm.
And but that ride was, you know, from a technology standpoint, such a mix of special effects and animatronics. And that's one of the things that I took away from this from a tech standpoint. I know we are going to talk tech a little later, but we'll talk about the app later. But just the combination of those two things, like the ability to transform Haunted Mansion into Jack Skeleton themed everything without replacing all of the animatronics. Right? Yes, they replaced
Hmm.
some. Yes, they did some of that because normally it's Oogie Boogie, right, and the ghosts and stuff
Right.
that are in Haunted Mansion. But just the way they mix those things and they give you this experience. The security guard, because we rope dropped all 3 mornings, right? And the security
Right.
guard at the first morning said, "How many rides are there in Disneyland?" And we're like, "We don't know." He's like, "One, Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. Everything else is an attraction." And they really are.
Okay.
They're not just. I mean, Incredicoaster, for example, is a roller coaster. Is just a roller coaster, right? I mean, that's
Right.
all it is. But almost everything else is an experience or an attraction where you're immersed in the world that the ride is themed after. And so Haunted Mansion was like that. Um, Alice in Wonderland was like that. Winnie the Pooh was like that.
Hmm.
Winnie the Pooh we did twice. It sounds funny, but we did Winnie the Pooh twice because it was just this perfect mesh of the virtual reality or not virtual reality, but special effects um,
Right.
and animatronics. Like you're seeing this animatronic Pooh dozing off and going to sleep, and then all of a sudden you see the spirit version of Winnie the Pooh rolling up above him because he's going into dreamland. And then you see
Right.
him, you go around the corner, and that same thing is just rolling across this black screen. And then all of a sudden you're in with all the heffalumps and the woozles trying to steal the honey, and they're in this just phenomenally bright world, right? And
Right.
it was absolutely incredible to see that. So Monsters Inc. was like that too, telling the Monsters
Okay.
Inc. story, and
Yeah.
Alice in
Some of the
Wonderland had a little
pictures you
bit of that
sent,
kind of stuff. Yeah,
yeah, the pictures you sent while you were on the y'all were on the Monsters Inc. ride, and we're looking at the animatronic parts or the figures, the statues that they have, and like it feels like you're in the cartoon. It looked really
yeah,
good.
yeah. They've got one ride that's Mickey's Runaway Train, something like that, right? And you go in and you're standing in a theater and you're watching the cartoon, and then all of a sudden the train, Goofy crashes the train because it's always Goofy, and then
Right.
and then uh Goofy he says, "Uh-oh, we got to fix this," and he's talking to the cast member that's the host there and saying, "Hey, can you help these folks into the cartoon while I get working on this?" And I looked down and I didn't realize that this has happened because there's smoke pouring out of the screen, right? And then
Hmm.
I look down and it looks like a hole in the wall, like a cartoon hole in the wall that then you walk through, get in the car for the ride, and then you're continuing on in the cartoon, but you're in the middle of the cartoon.
That is
So
good. That is cool.
super, super cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they have things like Mickey's PhilharMagic, which was a 3D movie. You actually go into it was a really cool old school style theater. This is in California Adventures, and you're in there and it's a 3D film, and it just feels like you're just absorbed into it. Right? That's typical free
Hmm.
3D stuff. But then you go to Soaring Over California. It used to be Soaring Over California. Now it's Soaring Over the World. And I got to see Iguazu Falls, which is Brazil. And my wife's like, "Can you smell that?" And we had just come up over a rise over to a field, and all of a sudden you could smell the flowers, and then you could smell
Really?
the water. Yeah,
Wow.
so it's a 4D kind of thing, right? And so it's just this mix of animatronic tech and then this new school tech. And what I don't know is how they decide when to make things a virtual screen, right? Versus when to do
Right.
animatronics, but definitely a mix. And probably my favorite thing, and then I'll stop on this 'cause I don't want to spoil it for everybody, but Pirates of the Caribbean. Again, I did it 5 times. And there's a pirate hanging in a basket holding a chest. And you're coming
Hmm.
around him and you're looking at him, and you can tell that his whole face is the skeleton, right? His whole face. There's a rope going right down the middle. And as you go around him in the ride, all of a
Hmm.
sudden his entire face, not just the side you're looking at, is full flesh, like the transformation in the movies, right? And I'm just
Yeah.
looking at that thing going, I don't know how in the world they did that, but it was just the absolute coolest special effect, right? It was just
Yeah.
absolutely unreal. And so, I got a survey from them already and I actually filled it out. And one of the questions was the cost of entry to the park because it's not cheap, right? I mean,
Right.
it's not cheap. It's actually the funny thing is there's a amusement park here in northern Utah called Lagoon. Um, it's the same price to get in there for a day as it is to get into Disneyland, but the biggest difference is the scope for one thing, right? But then also when you go to Lagoon, you're just standing on the pavement waiting in a line to go on a ride. When you're in these Disney attractions, other than
Hmm.
Fantasyland, some of the older stuff is like that, right? But when you're in these newer attractions, even the wait in line is an attraction. There's stuff that you're focusing on.
Right.
So, we actually paid for a fast pass to Rise of the Resistance so we could get in there because that was one of the things for sure I wanted to do. And so we paid extra. It was not cheap to be able to go right at a certain time. and be able to skip
Right.
the line and get straight in. Well, we wanted to do that ride again, so we went back Saturday and just decided to wait in line, and it was an hour wait to get into the ride. And the funny thing is I was
Versus
like, yeah, versus the fast
versus how
pass, which
long?
you just walked up. Yeah, I didn't wait
Okay.
at all with the
Okay.
fast pass, right? I mean, literally, I was like next in line to go in when we did the fast pass. But
Okay. Okay.
what what I realized we missed is as you're walking through all of those pictures of like the blasters and the uniforms and all of that kind of stuff, as if you're waiting in line. You get to see that stuff. If you fast pass it, you're skipping that entire. So yeah, you're not waiting in line, but at the same time, you're also missing all of that environment that you just get immersed in before you actually get in the ride. And Radiator Racers which is a car driving thing, was the same way, right? You could skip all of
Right.
the line, but then you miss a bunch of that environment kind of stuff. So super, super cool. So that mix of tech and stuff like that. I mean, it just, what I found myself one of the times I went on Pirates hoping that the ride would lock up, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
they'd have to turn on the lights and we'd have to get out of the boats
And
and
you could
walk out because I wanted to see the behind the scenes, right?
right, yeah, to see the magic behind the curtains, so to speak. Yeah, yeah.
And I,
I'm looking at the last few. You're in, I guess, a boat. I don't know which ride this is, and they had miniature versions of the castles from like Aladdin, and I
yeah,
recognize this one from is it Sorcerer in the Stone, and a few other castles that I don't recognize. But so that's the stuff that you mean, like just the
that's,
details in the waiting line.
yeah, well, that one we're actually in the boats going along, but that's in Fantasyland. So that's an older ride. The
Okay.
joke was don't touch the water. It's been here since 1955. So, but you're actually
Right.
floating along but they've updated it because they've got the castle from Arendelle from Frozen in there, right? So they've
Okay.
got all of this stuff in there. And, but no, like if I think about the Indiana Jones ride, which luckily opened Saturday and we were able to go, we didn't
Oh,
realize
so
because
you
it had
were
been closed. Yeah, it had been closed for some work. And so Saturday we completely changed what we were doing first to go see that. So, but in that one, you're down in a forbidden temple, right? You're walking into the bowels of the temple, and there's all kinds of vines and all that kind of stuff. And I just remember sitting there thinking, going, as long as I don't have to walk through the bugs, right, from Temple of
yeah.
Doom. Yeah, so
Right.
you get immersed in these, and you can see that the glowy skeleton guys are from Indiana Jones. They're the ones that are throwing the stuff. And so if you go back a couple of pictures, you can just see the amount of detail that's just built in to the wait in
Yeah.
line and these environments that you're in. So same thing
Yeah.
with the Star Wars ride, which was right after that. So it's just super, super cool. And Indiana Jones, actually, we hit it first because they said it always breaks down. It's the one that breaks down the most, I guess. And
Right.
and I understand why, because it's the cart you're on is on a track, but it's not smooth. You're always kind of shaking as if you're on a mine cart thing, right? And I could have done without
Right.
the shaking, but we actually got stopped 2 or 3 times. And I thought, okay, this is going to be my chance to walk out the backside of a ride and get to see some of the behind the scenes. But no, they got it up and running. So
Okay.
anyway,
Which which one of these rides gave you motion sickness? You had mentioned that
yeah.
that one of the rides kind of made you sick.
So Smuggler's Run, which is you're piloting the Millennium Falcon. It's really cool because there's basically 5 or 6 of you in the cockpit and you get assigned a
Mm-hmm.
role. So you're either the pilots or you're the gunners or you're the engineer that harpoons the cargo. And you actually are expected to do stuff. And Karen and I got to be the pilots. And so we're right in the front of this, and you're in the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon, and there's this virtual screen doing the whole ride. And I was trying to be the left and right, and she was the up and down, and then she also got to pull the button to jump us into hyperspace
Cool.
and or light speed. I can't remember which one's hyperspace, which one's light speed. But anyway, so we did that. It broke down. The ride actually stopped, and he goes, "Oh, this is embarrassing." It's the bounty dude or whatever his name was. we're having some
Hmm.
technical difficulties, and while we're waiting for them, we'll get it back, just as if the ship broke down, not the ride, but as if the ship broke down. So, but anyway, they weren't able to get it up and running. And so they took us straight back to the front of the line and put us in another session. And those two, I came out of that not feeling great.
Mm.
The motion sickness had kicked in. And I think um, all the back and forth and all that kind of stuff. And then we went straight to the Rise of the Resistance for the Fast Pass. And I couldn't believe the second time I went through Rise of the Resistance how many details I had missed because I was sick. But then we went from there straight over to Star Tours, which is a complete 3D video. Didn't catch that I needed to pick up the glasses. So then I'm trying to watch Star Tours in 3D with the shadows, right? Without 3D glasses on. So that was horrible. And so then we decided, okay, we better do that again with the glasses. And the line was short. So we went back through. By the time all of that was done, so it's the Millennium Falcon and the Star Tours. Between those two, the motion sickness was just not cool, and it took me a couple hours to
Yeah,
settle. So,
just to start feeling better.
yep,
Okay.
yep,
Well, folks, be aware of that when you do these. I've never experienced motion sickness in my entire life until I told you the PlayStation VR. We talked about it when we talked about the Vision Pro and things like that. And my concern was, will I get the same motion sickness after wearing that for a couple of hours or so? But yeah, but still
yeah.
pretty cool. Still a really good experience. Um, so I have anything else of note that you want to talk about from the park? I do know you started something in my household because as we're going through the pictures, it was the day you guys checked out the Spider-Man. Um, just tell you real quick, a typical teenager, right? They go from, well, that's not very cool to at the very end when we got to the last picture, like, okay, when are we going? Like that's how quick my 13-year-old turned around. But yeah, typical. He's just looking like, oh, I saw that on Instagram or something. And, oh, I saw my friends are saying it's not really that cool. Then we watched a little video, the little act that you showed with Spider-Man, and they're launching him in the air, and he's swinging around and climbing up and down the building. And yeah, by the end of that, it was when are we going? So, uh, yeah, I wasn't the only one enjoying the pictures that you were sharing out when you were there. Really cool.
My 2-year-old grandson is huge into Spider-Man, and they didn't know where we were. Our daughter didn't tell them until Saturday, and hadn't shown them
Right.
any of the pictures. And
Probably for the best.
yeah. But then when he saw Spider-Man and then found out that Grandpa got to high five Spider-Man, I mean, he was just,
Right.
I want a high five, yeah. So yeah, so
Yep.
that stuff is cool. We got to see Black Panther wander in, and the
Yeah.
guards from Wakanda were doing a little demonstration, and we didn't really focus on seeing a lot of the characters. I only saw one
Yeah.
princess wandering through, which I found interesting, but again, I didn't spend time in Fantasyland, which is I'm sure where they're hanging
Yeah.
out. So
Where they're mostly at. Yeah.
so yeah.
All right. So anything else you wanted to cover?
Let's
Anything
talk
that
about the park app. Let's talk about the app.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, let's jump into that.
So
So I know on the cruise ship we have on most cruise lines, Carnival and Royal Caribbean, those are the only two that I've been on. They both have apps, and through these apps, this is where you book your restaurants, you book your events, and different things you can order. You order room service, the menus are on there, everything. You pretty much use the app for everything. Any event that's coming up, add it to your calendar, you get a reminder and stuff like that. It's really the only app, especially when you're away from data, Wi-Fi and stuff, because all of that is charged. It's the only app that you can use for free, and it has everything you need in it,
yeah.
including on some of the newer lines to lock and unlock the door. So I didn't know. My question was, you mentioned it earlier, was there a Disney app? And you said there is a Disney app.
Yeah. I mean, I have outside of the stuff I use every single day, like messages, email, those kinds of things, right? I
Hmm.
don't think I've found an app that was so useful to enhancing something I was trying to accomplish as the app. Didn't crash. didn't have inaccuracies in it. The only one thing that was weird is we set a reservation for dinner and then we got there and they didn't have it. And they said, well, we only get our reservations in the morning. So we still had to wait 20 minutes, but not a big deal. But so in there, and I didn't even realize this was going to be a thing, but once you get in the park, it opens up a bunch of stuff. And so once we got in the park, because the park opens at the gates open at like 7:15, but the rope doesn't drop to actually get you into the main attractions and stuff like that. You can wander the Disney Main Street. That's about it, right? Until 8 o'clock. So as we're standing in line to have them open it up, that's where you show your tickets, and you show your ticket. And the first day they took a picture of both of us, and then after that they didn't need the picture. They've got the picture associated with our tickets, right? So that you can go in and
Okay.
out of the park. But then once we get in there, then you have the option of spending more money, of course. So in the
Right.
app, that's where we bought the multi-lane fast pass, which basically allows you one ride at a time. So like I could book to go on um, the Millennium Falcon ride. I could say I want a multi-pass, I want a lightning lane that at this time. Okay, great.
Mm-hmm.
And then either 2 hours has to go by from when you do that, or you have to use that lightning lane pass, and then you can book another one on certain rides. And it's not all the rides, but it's most of the big ones. So in theory, you could
Okay.
just reserve your time at most of these rides. The catch is you can only do it one at a time, right? So that was
Okay.
one thing that you could do in the app. The other thing you could do in the app was what we did for Rise of Resistance the first time, which was actually pay uh, extra. There were that one and the race cars in California Adventure. Those were the two rides that you could pay to skip the line on, and it wasn't cheap on either one of them, but we did it on one and not on the other. So then you could also do that and reserve your time as well. And then also
Okay.
like for Haunted Mansion where you had to get in a queue, then you could go in and join the virtual queue. And by the time I realized we needed to do that, we were like group 59. And then it says, okay, we'll let you know when your number's been called. And sure enough, once our number was called, it popped up an in-app notification or just a standard iPhone notification that said, hey, you head over to Haunted Mansion, you're ready to go. So
Nice.
super cool. And it
Okay.
would do that with all of our passes and stuff like that. So that was great. But then you can also see all of the attractions and how long the wait times are, right? And it'll tell you
Okay.
real time how long the wait time is. That's also how you could see if a ride was closed temporarily or whatever. And then you can also tap into the ride to get all the details. What kind of a ride is it? What do you expect? And then it has expected wait times by hour. So you can kind of see when it's going to be the busiest and then when it's going to be not as busy. So
Okay. So you can kind of
just,
plan your day just glancing at
yeah,
the app. You can say, okay, let's steer clear of that
yeah,
area, or let's. Okay,
yeah.
that's pretty cool.
The one thing I would say, the app is broad enough that you could get lost in it. And so we did that first day. I mean, by noon on day one, we had hit almost everything we thought we wanted to hit in Disneyland by noon
Mm-hmm.
on day one.
Okay.
And I probably walked like 17,000 steps. So, I mean, that's part of the reason why we were super, super tired. And we
Right.
stayed in that park that day clear until like 10 o'clock that night.
Okay.
And, but so you can do that. Um, but part of it, you don't want to get lost in the app, right? You don't want to be so focused that you miss. I'm trying to book I just got on Pirates of the Caribbean because I had, used the lightning pass on that, and I'm trying to book the next lightning one, and I'm missing the ride, right? You don't want to
Right.
get caught up in doing some of that kind of stuff. So I think there is this balance um, with that, though. But then you can pull up the map and you can sort between attractions and dining, and then you can search for certain things in the map like restrooms, and it'll pull up where all the restrooms are, and water bottle fill stations, where are all the water bottle fill stations. And then for food, most of the places that are quick service, because most of them are, you can mobile order, right? And so
Okay.
it'll just say, hey, here's the times we have available. And so you pick a time, you put in your order, and then you connect it. It's they have Apple Pay built into all of that. So, um,
Nice.
so that you do
Which you
that,
wouldn't
and
think
then when
Disney
you,
would do.
oh yeah, no, it's
You,
all over the place. So, yeah, and you get when you get to the place during your time, then it says, I'm ready, prepare my food, and you tap that button, and then you get a notification that says, okay, your food is ready for pickup at mobile order window 1 or 4 or whatever
hmm
it is. And you walk up to the window, they ask for your order number, you tell them, and you take your food and you go. So
Okay.
we did that a ton in both parks. So really, really, really nice.
Yeah,
Um,
that
and
was going to
then
be one of my questions too. Was can you book restaurants and order food and stuff
yeah,
like that?
yep,
And yeah,
yeah.
that's pretty cool.
And you can do your reservations and stuff if they're available there. So, yeah, I mean, you can do pretty much everything you need to, including check out in their souvenir shops. And so, in the souvenir
Okay.
shops and stuff, a lot of them had the smaller ones inside the park, not as big of a deal, but they're big, big shops. And the one in downtown Disney, you can actually do mobile checkout. So you just go in and you scan the barcode, and you tell it which store you're in, it scans the barcode, and when you get done, you just hit checkout. Again, you pay with Apple Pay. You walk up
hmm
to, they have mobile checkout stands everywhere, and you show them the QR code. They scan it with their phone, and they tell you, okay, you're good to go. And you walk out the door. So,
Nice. Nice.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
just super, super well done. I mean, that's how an app should be built.
Right. Right. So what about app integration with the rides? Right. You know, you sent a few pictures where they have the ride and everybody screaming and things like that on the ride, the actual photo while you're on the ride. But it looks like you took a picture of the monitor or the kiosk or whatever outside of the ride. Can you purchase like pictures and stuff from those rides in the app, or is it
Yeah.
not that advanced yet? Okay.
No, it is. So we didn't because it didn't make a difference. They do it on Space Mountain. They do it on uh Rise of no Guardians of the Galaxy. We need to talk about that. I didn't even
hmm
talk about that ride. Remind me to talk about Guardians of the Galaxy. So yeah,
Yeah.
so there's a few of those rides where you go up and I took a picture because I needed the code. So what you do is you go in the app and you enter in the code, and then it allows you
Okay.
to go in and purchase gift pictures or whatever the case may be. So
Okay.
before I
So,
forget,
but what about?
Guardians. Yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I was saying, what about like ride features and stuff? Is there something that happens in a
No,
ride that it says, "Look at your phone," and there's some magic
no,
on your phone, and nothing like that?
no, no. I mean, in some of the rides, you wouldn't want to do that because you would lose your phone, right? Um,
Right.
so no augmented reality integration,
Yeah,
which
that's what I
would
meant.
be really cool. Even walking around the park, right, would be super super awesome to have the augmented reality
Yeah.
stuff. I will say that with the new feature coming out on iOS 18 and the new phones, where you press and hold the camera control button and it pops up the "What is this?" I would love to see how that's going to
Yeah.
function in Disneyland. So that kind of stuff would be, letting the AI tell you some of that kind of stuff. So it would be really cool. And then, also in the app, there's a genie because of course it's Disney, right? There's a genie that could help you plan out your day and some of that kind of stuff. But I did not go OCD in the app. I did a bunch that first morning, but then after that, we just kind of did more of go with the flow. I actually not regret, but I learned my lesson that the second day in California Adventures, we probably
Mhm.
didn't need to pay the extra money for the Lightning Pass. Um,
It was a
so we could
slower
have
day.
we it was, and then like when we want to do Radiator Racers, we just waited in line. Um, so I think I would have passed on that. The other thing that you have to figure is there's this balance. So we started using you can only use like the multi pass. You can only use it once on an attraction a day, right? So if there's an
Okay.
attraction that you wanted to do twice, you don't want to use the multi pass in the morning because the lines are shorter, so you want to go through that ride then and use the multi pass later. But the challenge is that they only let so many multi passes per time frame, right? And so
Right.
there's this
Right.
balance of is it going to be 10 o'clock? Like Space Mountain, we didn't do. and we didn't do the Matterhorn. We had done those. Those rides are pretty much the same as they were when we were there, however many decades ago. But we didn't do
Right.
those because the multi-passes kept pushing later and later at night, right? And so there's this balance between when do I use the multi-pass and when do I just wait in line, that you have to find. So you think, okay, I'll just wait in line in the morning and then I'll use the multi-passes in the afternoon. But then everybody's trying to use the multi-pass in the afternoon. So you may not get a reasonable time frame. And again, you can only have one multi-pass reserved at a time, or you have to wait 2 hours in between, right? And so it's not like I could just go
Yeah.
book out every single ride I want to do an hour for the rest of the day, right? It doesn't work quite like that. So
Okay.
yeah, super
Okay.
cool. Can we
So you
talk Guardians of
mentioned
the
that.
Galaxy for a second?
Yeah. Let's get into it because that's another thing that changed my. All of a sudden, everyone's against cruising now. We have to focus on Disney just to go
Yeah.
see the Guardians of the Galaxy. So yeah, that's another thing that changed. Let's
So
talk about it.
I'm old, and this one, it used to be Tower of Terror, right? And it's a vertical ride. That's all it is. So all you're doing is sitting in a seat going up and down. So
Right.
you've got
Going up. Yep.
drops, and you've got all of a sudden you're launched, and it's dark when those things are happening for the most part, right? And then you get to certain levels
Right.
and the doors open up and you've got a gigantic screen, right, with Star-Lord being
Mm-hmm.
grabbed by that big octopus thing. And so the premise with Guardians of the Galaxy is you're trying to help them escape. Rocket got out, but all of the others are captured by that dude that collects everybody, collects all
The
the
collector.
species
Yep.
and stuff. Yeah. I don't know. I've only seen one of the movies, so
Right.
but anyway, so that's kind of the premise. And you know um so super super cool, but boy was I not ready for the drops. I mean, I came out of it the first time coughing because it felt like it had pushed all the junk in the bottom of my chest up into my throat, right? Because you're
Right.
just doing these drops and stuff like that. But same kind of thing, right? So we multi-passed that one. So we went there
Okay.
and went straight through, right? And then we got out and the line was only like 15 minutes. That was one of those where, right, if you want to go through it multiple times, you shouldn't have used the multi-pass.
Right.
So we decided to go in it again. And then you're just some of those pictures, right? You're in that environment for 15 or 20 minutes or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And you get to take
It's
pictures
crazy.
like the Ultron statue that I took
Yeah,
the
the
picture
Ultron
of,
bot.
right?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
were
Yeah.
looking at it like, is this a prop from the movie or did they make this for? Either way,
Yeah.
it's really cool.
But what they did with Guardians of the Galaxy is they close it at 2 o'clock, and then at 3 o'clock they open it with a different theme called Monsters After Dark. Now I don't know if that's a Halloween thing or if it's just what they do, but so
Okay.
the first time you're trying to help those folks escape, well, the second time you go back and Rocket's like, "What are you doing here? The tour's over. You got to get out of here. All the monsters are out of their cages." And he's showing you on the
Yeah.
map the heat signatures. And it's like, well, actually, now that you're here, help me find Baby Groot, right? So then you go in and instead of it being, and there are different scenes. It's not like every time you go on the ride, it's the exact same scenes that they put up. But
Hmm.
same thing with Star Tours. But the Monsters After Dark, it was this giant half dragon, half dog thing that was just massive that was trying to get to you and all that kind of stuff. Same ride, but different scenes and stuff like that. And it seemed like it was glitching out. And Karen was like, I think they're having a problem with their speakers. And I'm like, no, I think it's on
Hmm.
purpose because all the
Yeah,
monsters
that's
are
part
out
of the
and
ride.
wreaking havoc on the tower, right? So that was super cool from a special effects standpoint. And then so we did that one 3 times, twice back to back, and then once for the Monsters After Dark. And
Hmm.
we did use the multi-pass for the Monsters After Dark, and then that was the last thing we did in the park there. And other than grabbing some souvenirs, because I had to grab Spidey souvenirs for the boys,
Right. Right.
um, but Rise of the Resistance. Actually, there were a few rides that were like this. You're not on tracks like you used to be, right? You used to have these tracks that locked you in, but you're not on tracks, but yet you're following certain pathways and stuff like that. But Rise of the
Hmm.
Resistance, just the combination of animatronics and special effects was just unreal. I had heard this before that you get in the shuttle and you're supposed to be fleeing to the rebel base, and you get caught and you get pulled in with a tractor beam into a Star Destroyer. So you go in and you're outside, and then the doors open after you get caught and you're inside the cargo bay with all those stormtroopers. That's the classic picture that you see from Rise of the Resistance, right? Where all the
Right.
stormtroopers are lined up. But behind you, you can see ships flying around on the outside and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I don't know how they do it that you walk in and out the same door and you're in this other environment. But and then you get in a cart, you go into a prison cell, and Kylo Ren comes in. He's using the Force, and everything goes dark, and the whole room's like vibrating and stuff like that. And then you get in the cart and go through the ship. But just the amount of detail that I caught the second time, like when the blasters are firing, you're seeing chunks of the wall fall off, and
Wow.
just unreal the amount of detail that they put into
Yeah.
this stuff. So that probably was my favorite ride. I know one of the questions you had on here was what was the thing you liked the most. What I liked the most overall was the integration of tech into this just magical
Yeah.
experience, right? But those two rides, even though I don't know that I might be getting a little old for the Guardians of the Galaxy style stuff. And the Incredicoaster I didn't really enjoy at all. It's been a while since I've been on an intense roller coaster, and I just didn't enjoy it at all.
Yeah.
So I probably won't hit that one again. But
Yeah.
those rides that just integrated that tech, just Rise of the Resistance, I could just go on it over and over and over again.
So there was a picture you sent where you're obviously you're in a Star Destroyer, right? And you're looking up, and it looks like Huxley and Kylo Ren are like up, on the command deck or whatever they call it. It's elevated on the Star Destroyers. So was
Yep.
that part of the ride, or was that part of the
Yep.
line going into the ride? That's part of going in.
No, that's part of the ride. So that's the
Okay.
part where
Okay.
you're escaping. They know the rebels have escaped, and and there's two cars, so one's on each side of the bridge in between the two,
Mm-hmm.
and he turns around and realizes that you're you're the escaped prisoners, right? And so then he starts to chase you, and so then he keeps showing up around corners, and at one point you close the doors on him hard, and then
Mm-hmm.
and you go into the next room, and the lightsaber comes down through the ceiling, right, and is starting to cut a hole. So
Nice.
I mean, it's just, we probably should have said at the beginning, spoilers, but yeah, it's just
Yeah.
the effects on that are just, they were just out of this world. So
Yeah.
I mean, literally.
Yeah. A lot of attention to detail. I mean, it's crazy the amount of detail they put into this. I really like it.
And then
So,
I will say
oh,
one other ride I went on. I do not like this ride. I apologize to everybody in advance because the song is now going to get stuck in your head, but I had to go on It's a Small World. Um, it,
yep,
it was my mom's favorite ride. So she
right.
passed away last year, and so my sister's like, "You have to go on that ride," and I'm like, "Okay." And I came back and said, "Yeah, I still don't like that ride." She said, "Oh no, I hate it." I'm like, "Well, then why did you tell me I have to go on it?" It's like, because it was mom's
Yeah,
favorite ride, and so yeah, so we went on
yeah,
It's a Small World, and that is classic Disney, right? All
right.
animatronics. Um, I mean, that is as old school Disney as it gets. So they still have that hold over. Merry-Go-Round still
Yeah.
like that too. I don't know how many of the other rides in Fantasyland would be like that, but most of the rest of the rides they've started to integrate the technology into the animatronics.
So they have updated it. They have updated Small World.
Small World, no. It's still
So it's still the same.
it's
Okay.
exactly what I remember from 30 years ago. So
Right, right. Okay. All right. So technology wise, were there any like so I know they have like the rides are a mix of virtual and things like that, but around the park, we're talking about it would be cool if they would throw some AR stuff in there around the park, but were there any like tours, like guided tours or not guided tours? What do they call the ones when you just listen to the
yeah.
MP3 and you
No.
kind of follow
Nope.
nothing like that?
No, I
Okay,
think
because
the other
my
thing that
wife and
was
I enjoy stuff like that.
yeah. No, at least not that we saw. I mean, the cool stuff is they scan your phone, they scan your tickets. It's just the barcode, right? They scan them with iPhones and take your
Hmm.
picture. When you use the lightning passes, they come up as a barcode, and you slide them in a slot at the lightning lane uh, line, right, or entrance
Okay.
to the ride. All of them were a little different, right? So they were, and they made a little bit different sound. So they were tried to theme some of them to the rides, right? So whether it was, if I remember right, it was like the rebellion symbol. But yeah, they do those. You just slide it in a little slot, and it bings, and you swipe to the left, so I could do Karen's, and then we'd go into the ride. But yeah, no augmented reality kind of stuff, but I do think that's an
Okay.
opportunity. Definitely something that would have been super, super cool. The only problem I think you have with that is how do you, it was hard enough with the crowds, and we were not there on busy days. Um,
Hmm.
we went on days that were generally supposed to be below average crowds. And I don't know how you would do that augmented reality stuff and not constantly have people just smacking into
Right.
each other,
Right.
right? And you've got people going with strollers, and you've got people in wheelchairs and electric wheelchairs. I
Right.
mean, it's anybody and everybody. And so I think there's a there's a balance that they probably have to strike there. And like when
Right.
characters come out, or like when Spider-Man was there, I mean, they have handlers with them all the
I know, and
time,
they kept the
right?
crowd
And
moving. Don't
yeah,
stop. Don't stop. Keep moving through. Right. I saw that.
yeah,
Yeah.
stuff like that. So I think there's this balance between how much of that can you do. But once you get in an attraction, sky's the limit, right?
Right.
So yeah,
Right. Because you're there waiting for a couple of hours anyway in line.
yeah,
So, but yeah, I can see traffic jams at all of the AR spots or
yeah,
whatever they have. All right.
yeah.
So
So I
before.
thought it was funny. I don't think we waited in a line more than 5 minutes until like noon on that first day, just because of how we
Okay.
managed the passes and stuff like that. And then I think we
Yeah.
did wait for something for like 30 minutes or something like that. So definitely the longest we waited in line was day 2 Radiator Racers and day 3 Rise of the Resistance.
Hmm.
Those were the two, but they weren't even the full hour. Neither one of them were. So Pirates of the
Okay.
Caribbean had a really long line a couple of times when we went through it. And that one is not one of the rides where you can um, where you're immersed in an environment while you wait. You're just kind of outside in a line.
Okay.
Um, so
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So before you wrap up and give us your overall impression, is there anything you would do differently? Is there something you're going to different hotel, different location, different
I really
packages?
want, yeah, I really want to book the hotels that are right across the street, so you don't have to get on the shuttles. I mean, the shuttles weren't bad, right? I mean, it's just a five
Right.
minute ride. But literally, if they have some hotels that you can cross the street and you're at your hotel. So that's my goal for the big trip, is to be in one of those, because um, there were a lot of cranky kids.
I
And,
would imagine
you
so.
know, my sister made the comment that I get why parents do some of this stuff, but it also is not good on kids. And all 3 of my kids are going to be somewhere on all of my grandkids, right, are going to be somewhere on the
Hmm.
spectrum. And so I know they're going to get overstimulated. They're going to get overly tired. I mean,
Yep.
parents want to go at 7 a.m. and go till midnight with little kids, right? To get the full experience,
Hmm.
because you want to get the full experience and get the money in and all that kind of stuff. But man, we saw kids falling asleep. We saw kids throwing tantrums, and I just could see my grandkids doing some of that.
Right.
Just not because they're wanting to be naughty, but because they're just tired and overstimulated. So if we were right across the street, then you can go and you can take a nap, or you can go and swim in the pool at the hotel for a
Yep.
couple hours, right? And do some of that, and go back and eat something that's not deep fried. Food was
Right.
expensive. I mean, I broke down, me, I went back and did all the analysis on how much we spent on food and souvenirs and tickets and all this kind of stuff. And
Right.
um, so,
Right.
so that's one thing I would want to do. Um, I want to bake in rest days. So we hit it hard. That
I can see that.
25,000 steps that first day just burned us
Yeah.
out. And what it would have been nice would have been to have the next day to rest, right? And just
Yep.
relax and do something like that. So that's one thing I would do. I think I'll be more selective about when we decide to pay the extra for the passes versus not.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to decide if I want to do the park hopper passes where you can go between the two parks, because that might
Oh, I
mix in some
thought you could
variety.
do that anyway.
No, it's
I didn't
extra
know that
money.
that wasn't. I didn't
Yeah,
know
no, it's
that.
extra money. Yeah.
Okay.
And you have to have reservations, right? So that they can manage crowds and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
I think, rest days closer to go back and not feel like we have to stay in the park for 24/7. We will definitely rope drop at least one of the days with them so they get that experience. And so those are probably the things that I would do different this next time around.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, just let me mention this. I know I mentioned it several times before, but Disney has their newest cruise ship. It's still new. It's less than a year old, and I believe by the time you guys go to on your Disney trip, they'll have their latest ship in the water by then. So perfect for the grandkids. It'll be the Disney experience that you want, minus all of the steps and all of the all of the walking. It still has all of the events and all of the shows. And from what I understand, we hadn't been on a Disney cruise, but they are just as good as going to the park. So just
Yeah,
just a thought.
we'll see.
Probably
I
won't
mean,
be any cheaper, but
no, my granddaughter. So last year they had a couple of folks at school that went towards the end of the year, and then already this year
mhm,
somebody went, and so she was talking about when can we go and when can we go, and so we brought them back all matching Disney shirts and got the
right,
Mickey ears with their
right,
names embroidered on them, and told them that, hey, maybe one day we'll go and maybe you can wear your ears. I've always really wanted to be there at Christmas because it will be
okay,
decorated like it was for
yeah,
Halloween, but it'll all be Christmas decoration, right? And
right,
problem is the time when the kids are out of school is some of the busiest, absolute busiest times at the park.
yeah,
And based on the crowds that I face today, I don't know that I could handle the busiest days. It would just be, you can't even walk, right? I mean, that's what
right,
Fantasyland felt like, is that you couldn't. It felt like I was back on a bus in Brazil where they just pack them in so tight that you don't have to worry about seatbelts or holding on because you can't move anyway. So,
right,
but I would like to experience the Christmas stuff, but I have a feeling that that's probably not going to be the whole family, just because I can't get kids out of school and all that kind
yeah,
of stuff.
yeah.
So,
Okay, well that makes sense. So overall, you recommend? You do
yeah,
recommend the trip?
yeah, yeah. It was a phenomenal trip, and um, fantastic. I think I'd keep it simple, even simpler next time. I think I would probably try
Yeah.
and fly straight out of here out there, just so that the trip back, right? The trip back, it was about a 6.5 hour drive, 7 hour drive, and you lose an hour because you're crossing that time zone. So that
Yeah.
trip back was pretty exhausting because you're already totally worn out.
Yeah.
Either that,
Yeah.
or I would drive back the day after we did the park, right? Not go to a park and then try and drive back, which is what we did. What we did Saturday. So yeah,
Okay.
go. You have a chance to go. It's not cheap. Um,
Yeah.
it's not cheap, and
Yeah.
I know we're going to talk about what stuff we pre-ordered. So last week was an expensive week
Yeah.
for
It definitely
for me.
was.
So, but
Definitely was.
it's one of those things. Here's my other thing. This is Grandpa looking back and based on comments my kids have made. So we moved to Texas when my kids were still pretty young. My oldest was in like 5th grade, and we were there for 10 years.
Hmm.
And we never really did a big vacation like this as a family. We would either go camping because that was close and cheap. We loved to do it, right? It was great. But
Right.
when we spent money to go somewhere, it was usually to come back to Utah to visit family, like back for a wedding or back for this or back for
Yeah.
that. And so, like, my youngest son has never been to Disney. The others went with the other three, I think, have all gone with school um, for school trips, right?
Okay.
Um, so they made it that way. But we had never done anything, no big vacations like this as a family. So, if I could go back, I would probably be more deliberate about trying to do something like this, whether it was Disney World or Disneyland or, something
Mm-hmm.
like this versus some of the other stuff that we did, getting stuff. I mean, this is retrospective, right? So this is grandpa's opinion
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
the stuff goes away, but the memories don't,
Yeah.
right? And so having a phenomenal experience, um, I mean, we had kids right after we got married, and we went on one anniversary trip to the Bay Area that was combined with a work trip for our 10th anniversary. But beyond that, our anniversary trips have been like a night or two, right? We went camping. We took the trailer to Twin Falls, Idaho a few years ago, and then we took the trailer to Bear Lake the year after that for our anniversary. So we had that, but we have never ever gone, besides that San Francisco trip, gone on a trip as
Right.
a couple. So, and is what it is, but I think I would have tried to do more of this kind of stuff with the family and with my wife. Try and make that kind of stuff happen. Now, again, it's not cheap,
Yeah.
so you have to put yourself in a position to be able to do it. And honestly, I mean, it's the situation that we're in where we just sold our home. We're not planning on buying a new home, all of this
Mm-hmm.
combination of things that consulting business is picking up, that kind of stuff. That's what enabled it from a financial standpoint. But you can do it. My father-in-law and mother-in-law were both educators, and my wife went multiple times as a kid to Disneyland.
Right.
And so you can make it happen, but you have to make it happen, and it isn't going to just happen like ours did this time. So that would be my biggest piece of advice to anybody out there listening is if you want
Yeah.
to have this kind of experience, plan for it and plan to make it happen. And it'll be much better than that, most important Christmas toy of the year, right? Yes, that's kind of stuff that kids want, but I just think this experience would be a much, much bigger deal than any of that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. So there's Grandpa looking back.
I agree with you 100%. It's always about creating memories and experiences and things. Um, the chickens are my neighbor's chickens are outside of my window. Sorry if you guys are hearing them, but yeah, about creating these memories. So we're saying, go on Disney, go to a cruise or something like that. Even if it's just a 3-day weekend, and you guys go down to San Antonio or whatever tourist,
A 3-day
little
weekend in the
destinations.
woods if you haven't done
Right,
that kind of
right.
stuff too, right? I mean,
Yep.
yeah,
Get out and do it. It's the point. It's not.
yep,
It's uh, again. I always go back to that question, that interview question that we would always ask when we were back at Stewart. Is it about the journey or the destination? Right. Some people
yep,
say it's a destination. Some people say it's a journey, and there's no wrong answer to that. So don't make it so much about the destination. It's about that trip. It's about that experience.
yep,
I love being on the road heading to, because us, not the most exciting vacation spot, but Oklahoma City, yay, to go visit the grandkids and all of that. But
yep,
that trip up, with me and my wife, and even with the kids, sometimes they, 2 or 3 hours, they get a little annoying. But the trip, the journey to that destination is some of the things that I love the most. So, yeah, it's not necessarily the destination. You don't have to go to Disney. Like Greg said, a weekend in the woods or that journey to the woods to that camping spot
yeah,
is creating those memories. So, yeah, I agree with you,
yeah.
Greg, 100%, man.
Other than the drive through the Nevada and California desert,
Yeah, that was
there's
that was really rough.
there's just there's just anyway. We'll leave it at that. So
Yeah, yeah. All right, folks. Well, that was the show for today. So if you're thinking about going to Disney and everything, we just urge you to take some of Greg's advice, some of his experiences, some of the things that he would change. Check out some of the things that he liked. Definitely that big pretzel. I really want to try that big pretzel that he had. So, but that was all we had. Programming note for the next couple of weeks. Again, Greg is coming back, and I'll be heading out on a cruise. We plan on going for 2 weeks this time. Um, I really need it. I really look forward to it. This is a cruise we take every year, one to celebrate all of our birthdays. Again, I mentioned that both of my sons and my dad and my birthday were all in September. Um, so this is usually the vacation time of the year, but it also marks the um, the beginning of our busiest season. So from the end of September through February of March this year is our busiest time of the year. It's particularly rough this year because we didn't get a slowdown. The summertime is usually
Yeah.
slow for us, and we didn't slow down one bit. We got the contract with Herman Park and Discovery Green picked up at that time. Buffalo Bayou Park was busy, and they were having concerts and stuff every week. So we didn't get a slowdown like we usually did. We stayed busy through February, all the way through now. We forced ourselves about a month or two ago to slow down, to stop taking so many gigs, to stop taking so many events and stuff. And so when we come back, I mentioned earlier in the show, I have to hit the ground running. The day I get off of the ship, we have to start preparing and stuff. So we won't have a show next week and the week after. However, I am going to try to finalize that first episode of the arcade repair. I got a lot done on it. If you guys checked out that short, I got a lot done. There's still a lot more to do, but I'll have that first episode out. So, Greg, if you have time, you'll be able to launch that next week. We'll have that, and then the week after there'll be no recording or anything, unless Greg puts together something to
Yeah,
to
I
do.
might try and record some unboxings or stuff like that. Depends on how the new tech stuff goes. So we'll see.
Right,
But
right. He'll.
I, here's the thing: we work hard, and now I got to work harder
Yeah,
because I got to pay for this trip. And if I want to go again, I got to work hard to pay for the other trip. So, and this podcast is a hobby, right? And the
yeah,
show is a hobby, right? It's not a moneymaker for us. So, I
yeah,
might take those couple of weeks to crank through a bunch of client stuff and get some things set. So, yeah,
yeah,
we'll see how it
yeah,
goes. But yeah, at least for the next couple weeks, no formal show.
yeah, yeah. Well, we'll go ahead and end it there. Thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see you when we're back.
It's a small world after all. There you go. Now it's stuck in everybody's heads. Have a good one, everybody.
All
Stick around for the post
right,
show.